I have a salesperson say, boy, my customers are loyal. They order something, we get them the right thing. We get it to them on time. We answer their questions when they call and we know what we're talking about. And I started laughing and saying, isn't that kind of minimum requirements of the job? That's your competitive advantage. That's what you're bragging about, is you took care of them. So what? What else have you done?
My guest today is Jim Pancero. We're welcoming him back for another visit. Here's 3 facts I think you should know about Jim. 1, he is a sales and sales leadership speaker, trainer, and consultant, and he's been doing that for over 40 years. 2, Jim has received many recognitions and awards, including being inducted into the National Speakers Association Hall of Fame. And 3, Jim believes in giving back, and he does that by volunteering as a photographer for Dallas area Special Olympics and a musical nonprofit organization. Plus, he's serving as the chair of the Board of Trustees of the National Speakers Association Foundation that currently looking after $4.5 million benevolent fund dedicated to helping speakers in need and improving the community. Jim Pancero, welcome back to Your Intended Message.
This is exciting. I'm honored to be invited back.
My pleasure. We had a terrific conversation last time. Jim, you are a sales guy. And last time we talked about sales. Everyone's in sales and using persuasion. However, this time let's focus on the sales function itself. And I think it's probably fair to say that we've been going, business, the economy, we've been going through a lot of challenges and change and disruption for different reasons, a pandemic, the economy, which disrupts business, and we've all had to learn to work differently. How has sales been changing, and how is it adapting to selling today to be successful? Or can we still do the same stuff that we read in that book that was published back in the 50s?
Well, they say the only reason you use a parachute when you're skydiving is because you want to go a second time. Right? It's the reality that selling, you don't have to be persuasive. You don't have to have strong structures in selling, but you're probably not going to make as much money as you could otherwise. One of my favorite taglines in any articles or things that I write is, you can always sell more. It's the title of one of my books. I just think it's so exciting. Is this idea, you can always sell more. So it is, I have found it's exciting working with salespeople more than any of the other professions, because they are compensated by the success they have directly. They tend to see the interest and opportunity to do it better because they see it's going to directly impact their income. But the reality is, selling has been going, I want to talk about the changes in selling, but from 2 levels. The first is what's happening right now. If we look just in the last 6 months, where are buyers right now because of COVID and the economy and all the things that have happened? But then the second thing is, I'd like to share with you and your listeners the idea of how selling has evolved, because every 10 years since the 1960s, every 10 years, what gives you a competitive advantage has dramatically changed. And it's what everybody's been doing, but then they move to the next level. I want to share with you those levels because I think that might give some insight as well. But if we look at it, don't mind me showing some slides. One of the realities we have today is we have shorter attention spans. The electronic environment has done that. I used to post 10 years ago, I was posting 10-minute videos online, and I thought that was a short video. Today, my average video is 1.5 minutes. And if I can get people to watch 1 minute of it, I'm excited. We have been trained to have shorter attention spans. The average commercial on TV, I think now, is only 15 seconds, where it used to be multiple minutes back in the 1950s. So we've seen this constant intensifying. It's almost like taking a searchlight and concentrating the beam until now we have a laser. And so because that I watch these shorter attention spans have really, and because of the cultures that we're in today, have caused selling to change dramatically. Some of the changes right now that I see happening. The first and most significant is sales reps are brought in later in the buying process. The example I use in my presentations, if you and your family wanted to buy a hot tub 10 or 15 years ago, what would you have done? You would have gone to a hot tub store, picked up some brochures, come back and talk to your family. You would have talked to a salesperson to get information. Today, George, if you wanted to buy a hot tub, what's the first thing you do?
You Google it.
And that's because you and I are old. Old people, first thing they do is Google it. The young people, the first thing they do is ask their friends. But the last thing either group does is talk to a salesperson. I've got a friend that's been driving us nuts because she needs hip surgery. She needs a hip replacement surgery because of all the jogging and running she did over her life. She blew her hip out. And so she's in pain. She needs to have the surgery. And every time I see her, she tells me who else she talked to. I found another person that had this surgery. I found these people that talked about this. And I finally said, what did the doctor say? She said, well, I'm not ready to talk to a doctor yet. And it was like, there's this lack of trust we have in experts today, so that if we don't validate it, it doesn't exist. I was actually sitting on a sales call with a salesperson writing to observe them selling, and they gave the customer a fact about their product. Somehow it could handle up to 100 PSI or pressure or something like that. Technical fact. In front of the salesperson, myself, the customer takes their phone and does this. You're right. And it's like, you didn't believe me? It's my company. But it was this lack of trust that's built up, frankly, because of the millennials grew up watching their parents, baby boomers, taking advantage of the car dealerships and the other places because of manipulative selling that they were growing up in. So they reject it. Look how many commercials on TV today are advertising cars, proving you don't have to talk to a salesman. There's one commercial that shows a salesperson holding a coffee cup, standing on the curb, watching all the cars drive by and saying, you don't have to have that experience if you go through us. There was another one, it ran, I guess, about a year ago. We had a young man dancing on top of his car, and he was dancing to the song, I bought a car and it didn't suck. And it was advertising in an online place. I mean, it was this resistance of what's happening. So because of that, if you're in sales today, we can't assume we're starting with a blank page with anybody anymore. What we have to do is walk in and say, so where are you? And you're interested in buying this stuff. Where are you in your evaluation process? What have you seen so far that you like? What do you want to make sure you don't get based on the research you've done? We have to assume they've done it because they always have. Major difference in selling today. We are not the first message on what's being talked about today. We have to then, a lot of times, correct it. I'll give you an example of this. I was one of my customers I'm very proud that I worked with over the years is the John Deere agricultural division, agricultural and turf, selling farm equipment and commercial cutting equipment. Just tremendous organization with great values. They sell at a high premium because they can get it, because they're so much better than everybody else. And I was doing training work for the people that sold riding lawnmowers in the spring in their dealerships in store. You walk in, it's springtime, weather hits. We need a new riding lawnmower. You go into the dealership. And what was amazing was over 50% of the people coming into the dealership were carrying a printout where they had already gone online and configured what piece of equipment they thought they wanted, what accessories they thought they wanted, and about what price they thought they were going to pay. So they were walking into the dealership and only asking two questions. Do you have this in stock? And how much? Now, that was okay, except for one slight problem. Over 50% of the people that are doing that had dramatically underconfigured the piece of equipment they needed. So if we sold them the piece of equipment they're asking for because of what they chose online, the product would fail. The most inexpensive, the least expensive piece of riding lawnmower equipment they have is this little, it's a small unit. It's meant for small yards. We had commercial cutters, people that cut grass for a living, come in and try to buy 5 of these because they thought that they were so much cheaper than the commercial model that was going to help them, but they wouldn't have even lasted 2 days on the job. So the problem we found was that the sales rep had to take more proactive control because the customer had already done research to make sure they did the proper research, because over half the time they haven't. And so they're looking at a biased assumption of what they want to buy because they didn't know what they were talking about when they looked on your website. That's happening with, I would guess, over half the buyers. So part of this is we have to take more proactive control going in on this understanding. Second major thing, sales calls are shorter today. We have less time to sell. If you go to a customer and say, hey, can I buy you lunch? They'll probably say, no, I just don't have the time. Yeah, I meet at my desk anyway, or I eat with my coworkers and we have other things we're doing, but no, they don't have time to sit there and hear about your vacation to Hawaii for an hour or to talk about theirs. The sales calls are shorter. So because they're shorter, we have to be more effective in what we do because we have basically less of a stage to perform on. We better make damn sure we get their attention when we do perform. And the other point is just supporting a customer, giving them great service isn't good enough anymore. It's losing the values of the customer. It's like, so what else have you done for me? I have a salesperson say, boy, my customers are loyal. Why are they so loyal? They say, well, when they order something, we get them the right thing. We get it to them on time. We answer their questions when they call and we know what we're talking about. And I started laughing and saying, isn't that kind of minimum requirements of the job? That's your competitive advantage. That's what you're bragging about, is you took care of them. So what? What else have you done?
Do you have a critical presentation coming up? One that can influence the direction of your career or business? How can you be ready to give it your best? Contact me. I'm George Torok, the speech coach for executives. Together, we can create and polish a superior presentation that will get you your desired results.
And so it's looking at this reactive selling is just not effective today like it used to be. It used to be if you took care of a customer, you serviced them, they kept around long term. Now they're saying, what else have you done for me lately? And then the final point is we need to make sure that we keep reminding our customers that if we do have differences, we remind them of them. I believe the toughest single question in selling is when a buyer sits there and says, okay, to a sales rep says, okay, look, you're the third vendor I've talked to this week about this stuff. Why, based on all the competitive options available to me, do I want to buy from you? And look at how people don't have their answers organized. They give generic responses, and they're not reminding the customer. The customer assumes everybody's equal. One of the biggest problems that John Deere has is showing new customers and convincing them we are different. Because they assume that any of their competitors selling the heavy equipment are doing the same technical function, and they all have dealer locations to support, and they all carry parts. So the assumption is service is the same every place, even when it isn't. So it becomes, how are you getting your message of uniqueness and value across? Because otherwise the customer will assume you're all the same. I want to go, I'm thinking it'd be kind of fun to cover what the evolution of selling is with this, so we're skills. Is that okay with talking about how the intended message has changed over about every 10 years. This is kind of, I always find this fascinating, watching this evolution, because about every 10 years, what gave you a competitive advantage was done by everybody, but then changed 10 years later. And I watched it starting in the 1960s, watch these changes every 10 years across the entire selling industry, whether you're selling distribution, parts and pieces, whether you're selling capital equipment, or whether you're selling services. Structures have all been the same. In the 1960s, success was had in all salespeople based on their ability to demo products. All they did was give demos and give samples. And the way they increased their competitive edge was their demos were biased, so that it basically looked better than it really was. They knew how to kind of bend it a little bit to make sure it looked easy, but boy, it was right within exacting standards of what they were doing. So the problem was customers started distrusting in the 70s the demos. We can't believe what we're seeing, because we found a lot of times they didn't pan out to be, they couldn't deliver what they were promising. So the whole industry said, okay, get ready, here we go. And in the 1970s was when the high pressure selling came about. If you don't see a difference in my product, we're just going to squeeze you. I learned to sell in the 1970s. I'm officially old. And learning to sell in the 1970s, I learned closing techniques. I actually in college went to a full day seminar that was held in my local community. And it was a small town. I went to Findlay University in Findlay, Ohio. So it was a small college, university in a small town. And there was advertised in the paper that one of the business groups was sponsoring a one-day seminar to double your sales. And I thought, this is great. It was like $35. I thought, well, I'll invest and see what adults are doing because I was still in college. And everybody in there was in local selling community. And the guy walked in and he said, raise your hand if you want to double your sales. We all raised our hands. And he said, the way you do that is you learn the top 12 closing techniques. And when you master those closing techniques, you will double your sales. And we spent the entire day going step by step through each of the 12 closing techniques. We never talked about value. We never talked about what the customer needed. All we did was, when you're this close, this is how you can tip them over into saying yes. So we learned the Ben Franklin close, the alternative choice close, the puppy dog close, the full body slam close, all these closing techniques to basically, the whole concept was, if we squeeze a customer hard enough, their head will explode, there's money inside, go ahead, take it, it's yours, was the basic selling concept. Here's the problem. At the same time, there were people going around the country doing seminars on how to learn all the closing techniques for salespeople. There was also an equal number of trainers going around doing training for purchasing departments on how to avoid the top 10 closing techniques salespeople are going to try on you. I was new to selling, but I actually had a customer. I went in and I did the Ben Franklin close for him. It's a 20-step process. It's very complex. You know what old Ben would do? You draw a positive on one side of a page, a negative on the other, and you list the positives. Then you put the pen down and say, what do you see as the negatives? The customer's looking at 5 positive, no negatives. If they pick up the pen, you got them. That was the whole pressure close. And I did this and it worked. The guy bought. I was frankly more surprised, I think, than he was. And as I was going to leave, I'm like only 20, 21 at the time. As I'm going to leave, he said, Jim, hold on a second. I want to congratulate you. And I turned around and I go, yeah. And he says, I see a lot of salespeople and I want to congratulate you. That is the second best implementation I have ever seen of the Ben Franklin close. What was he telling me? Kid, don't ever pull that on me again. It just knocked me down because he was right. So because this so turned off customers, look what salespeople did. How did they respond? Well, in the 1980s, they responded by saying, wait a second, no more pressure, no more hassle. Let's be friends. Friends buy from friends. Here's free tickets. You want to go to lunch? Would you like some liquor? What can I give you? And the whole idea was based on giving stuff to them. So frankly, it used to be, if you had football tickets, you took the customer there because it was a networking experience. During the 1980s, people gave baseball tickets and football tickets to the customer without anybody from the company going. It was a gift, with the idea that if we suck up enough, we will have your loyalty. The problem was customers took all the gifts, even pushed back on a lot of the gifts, but it didn't change the buying behaviors of how and why they bought. So the industry said, okay, that's not, relationship selling is not working. And one of the reasons it stopped working is it got out of hand. In the late 1980s, we were sending out gifts at Christmas to our customers, simple, like it was a frozen cheesecake, $25 cost. And we got a letter from a utility company I'd done major work with the year before, saying our gift receiving policy this year is don't give us anything. If you give us something of value, we will return it. If it's over $25 in value, and if it can't be returned, we will donate it, but it will not be received by our people. That is our rule. And I called the customer up saying, well, gee, I was going to send a cheesecake. Is that okay? He goes, well, that's no problem. Go ahead. And I said, well, what's the letter about? He said, last year, somebody tried to give one of our purchasing agents a boat. So look what happens. The ethics of when is it focused on you, the person, instead of you, the person having a job with the company, when that blurred because of all the free stuff that was being given away. That's when the industry said, no, we got to stop this. So what happened was in the 90s, it was kind of a business version of relationship selling. Instead of saying friends buy from friends, they were saying friends buy from experts. So here, let me do some free consulting help. Let me help you redesign your warehouse. Let me help you redesign your parts counter. I'll teach your people how to do this, all free, with the assumption that if I show and demonstrate my success of helping your business by helping you at no charge, you'll want to pay me. What do you think happened? How did buyers react to that?
Get all the free advice you can.
And they were working sometimes 3 and 4 vendors getting all this free stuff and still putting it out for competitive bid at the end. A lot of people got burned doing 6 months of free work for a customer on the assumption they were then going to get the application business. And then it was still put out for bid. I mean, it was a problem. So what happened was the 2000 hit, what we saw was negotiated partnerships became a big deal. And negotiated partnership says, hey, I'll do all this free stuff for you, but I want some kind of commitment. One of my customers it was the top vendor selling bowling equipment. And they were trying to sell to the USOs of the military, because the USO's goal is to create a home environment outside the country to make the soldiers feel more comfortable, the whole mission of the USO. And so they were putting in bowling centers. And my customer was bidding, but they were getting killed because they were the highest priced vendor because everybody else underpriced over this leading competitor. And so finally, they went to the government saying, we're helping you redesign these centers. We're helping you bring it current. In fact, so what are you going to do about this? Because we're not going to get the business. We're not going to be the lowest price. And they convinced the government that they could sell them a pre-bid consulting contract for $10,000. And with the idea that if the government would pay the $10,000 if this company did not get the bid, but if they won it, they get a $10,000 credit. Mm. So they were able to work it in, negotiated partnerships that, hey, if we do all this free stuff, we're going to get paid for it. There's going to be some kind of payback. You're not going to be able to just take advantage of it. Across all industries, this was happening. Then 2010 hit. And when 2010 was considered the Amazon years, where in 2010, if you think about 10 or 12 years ago, everybody was talking about speed, simplicity, and ease of use. The standard mantra from a buyer is, I can go on to Amazon and get this in 2 days. How come it's going to take you 3 months? So everybody, quality and his other issues become secondary, is all based on speed, simplicity, and ease of use. The websites of making it easy to order and track orders and everything, all of that grew out of that 2010 because everybody was focusing on how do we get faster, simpler, and easier to use as a competitive edge. And now we get to today. What's happening today? Today, we see competitive advantages based on connectivity and information control. Now, we got to stop for just a second. All of these are important for a salesperson's success. So it's not saying, because wait, we're not saying relationships are bad. The problem is just relationships are no longer the competitive advantage they used to be. So we can look at this list on the screen. These are all minimum requirements of the job today, but they're not going to give you a competitive advantage. It's the ante in the poker game. Just because you put in 2 chips to get cards doesn't mean you have a winning hand. So the idea is, where are you? Because my problem is, I ask salespeople, what's the strongest reason for your success in selling today? And their answer always tells me when they started their career. So the people that started selling in the 1980s, the baby boomers, they still talk about the critical importance of relationships. Or if you talk to people that came in about 10 years later, they talk about, boy, my customers buy from me because I'm an expert and I help them grow their business. How do you do that? Well, we do a whole bunch of free things for them, and then they want to buy from us. And you look, every one of these are important. It's just, is it truly a competitive advantage? Because we talk about your intended message. How do you get, as a salesperson, your intended message across? We've got to do it not just with a unique message of fact that we talk about, but we also have to do it in approach and a style. Look how many websites today that if you go to order from a company, they want to sign you up. They want to get you in their community. They want you commenting in their chat rooms. They want to make sure they give you the information of usage and consumption and help you measure that. Those are all important things that really weren't important 10 or 20 years ago. So if we look at this, yeah, the reality is selling is continually changing about every 10 years. And it's interesting, I presented this for years, this kind of evolution, and kept building it up as we got later. So I first started doing it where 2000 was the ending of it. I've had very few people disagree with it, saying, yeah, that's kind of what happened in my career. It might be off by a few years, but this has pretty much been the evolution, all industries, whether it's equipment, consumable products, or whether it's retail, or whether it is and services. This is the same evolution that's gone on. Interesting and fascinating watching that change that's happened. So
Jim,
now, go ahead.
Jim, so if all these factors need to be there today, how does someone achieve a competitive advantage?
It's become tougher. There's a couple of things with it. The first is Okay, that means we really need to train our salespeople, doesn't it? The first step is if we want to increase our competitive edge, we need stronger salespeople doing more impressive skills. This is what's fascinating. So what kind of sales training does your company need? That really depends on where the levels of both your people are as well as your management. There's 3 levels of sales training. The first level of sales training for the rookies, the beginners, somebody new to sales, is to do training on how to deal with your attitude and rejection. Some of the most successful sales trainers in the business, Zig Ziglar, Tom Hopkins, Brian Tracy. If you look, most of their training focuses on that first level of attitude and rejection. I remember Tom Hopkins said, if it takes you 10 sales calls to get a yes, and you make $100 when you make a sale, that means every time somebody told you no, you made $10. With this idea of just trying to get you over the rejection of it's okay to have somebody say no. But that's the problem, is that's the only training that's done at that first level. The second level of training then is the sales rep matures and the company matures in their awareness of skills. Because look how many companies have their annual meeting and all we do is bring a motivational speaker in. Somebody that has nothing to do with sales or sales leadership, but can talk about climbing a mountain or achieving something like that. Great message, but all it is trying to improve your attitude and deal with rejection. The next level up is, okay, to make you more effective as a salesperson, we need to give you product training and how to survive a sales call. This is steps of a sales call. How to ask questions, how to close, how to qualify. It's the mechanics of how to handle a sales call and be persuasive. So this is teaching the steps of a sales call. The third level, though, is how do we teach you how to gain a competitive advantage and how to gain more control of your account? So if we look, we got 3 different distinct levels of training, and we can't jump to the third level until we've worked through the first 2. I mean, I can't teach you how to play the golf course until I teach you how to consistently hit the ball. Because if you can't consistently hit the ball, there's no sense talking about course strategy, where to place a shot, because you can't hit anything anyway, right? Now, my definition of professional golfer is anybody that shoots under his weight, so it's not my sport. But still within this, look at the challenge of we got to teach you first, we got to take you to the driving range to teach you how to hit the ball before we can take you to the golf course and teach you how to play the course. So it's this evolution of process that's within this that becomes how we gain a competitive advantage. What level of training is the company actually going to help you? Because working on your attitude and rejection, though it helps, it's not going to give you a competitive advantage. Frankly, teaching you how to handle a sales call is not going to give you a competitive advantage. I don't know I've heard anybody say, well, this weekend I bought a car. And the neighbor said, why'd you buy a car? And the sales rep said, I couldn't help it. I mean, the buyer said, I couldn't help it. The sales rep did a perfect sales call. That doesn't exist. But if you don't have it, you don't make sales. But just because you have it does not mean competitive advantage comes from the third level. Now, there's 2 ways to describe that competitive advantage, if it's okay to kind of go in that direction.
Please do.
Excellent. Unless you have a question so far. The first is, where is your balance as a salesperson? I watch, when I see experienced and successful salespeople, they have a balance of skills in these all 3 areas. The first area is they have strong technical product and industry skills. They know what their products or services can do and the impact on the customer and how that is going to benefit or how it technically can perform to help the customer. It's knowing what you're talking about. The second corner on the triangle is your business, is your selling skills, your ability to be persuasive. I'm amazed how many people have a spectacular product and they don't know how to sell it. The problem is not in the products or the uniqueness of the products, it's the lack of skills in the salesperson. Because they don't know how to be persuasive. They don't know the structures. They don't know when to ask for a question and when to listen. The third set of skills is your business or financial skills. I mentioned before I did work with John Deere, there was a number of dealerships where the customers had this, the customers thought it was a trick, but we thought the sales reps had to handle it and actually helped us. Where in a lot of cases, John Deere, for the exact same throughput of equipment, for a combine to handle this many acres, same with both competitors, John Deere was 20% more expensive. That we had a couple customers would actually hand the salesperson a blank sheet of paper and say, okay, it's a $400,000 combine. You're $80,000 higher than the next bid I have. Show me how I'm going to get my $80,000 back. Now, I thought that was a spectacular question. And a lot of the sales reps choked, not because they didn't have an answer, but they weren't prepared. So a lot of my training actually went into business and financial skill training, because in selling capital equipment at 20% premium, that was a key edge to gain a uniqueness. Now, what I see is we need all three of those corners of the triangle. We need technical product skills, we need selling skills, and we need business and financial skills. The problem is most salespeople embrace one area, tolerate a second, and completely ignore the third. So the idea is, how do we become more balanced? How do you work in the areas that's not your best area, instead of putting more work into what you do best? There's a second thing, and I think that can help describe where the imbalance of a lot of salespeople are and what they can do to fix it.